Grace, mercy, and peace be with you in the name of our risen Savior, Jesus the Christ. Like many of you, my family's summer vacation plans were interrupted by COVID-19. We had been planning a road trip to Michigan, but in early April we suspended those plans. At that point, it just wasn't clear if hotels and restaurants and bathrooms and rest stops would be open and safe to visit. We were just uneasy planning a trip across country when we were unsure what we might encounter along the way. If you can relate to any of those concerns, now imagine setting off on a cross-country trip, not knowing if or when you will be able to get gas, not knowing if you'll be allowed into a restaurant to eat, or whether or not you can get your car repaired somewhere should something happen to it. Imagine not knowing if you'll be allowed to use a public toilet, or if you'll be pulled over for illegally passing a white motorist, or if you'll be arrested for being in a particular town after sunset. This was the reality for black motorists in our country until the mid-1960s, during the era of racial segregation and Jim Crow laws. During this time, it was illegal in many places for people of color to eat in white restaurants, to use white toilets, to stay at white hotels, or remain in so-called sundown towns after dark. And if it wasn't overtly illegal, in a lot of places it was definitely unwelcome, uncomfortable, and even unsafe. In response to this reality, and in order to help his community, a black mailman in New York City named Victor Hugo Green published a small booklet in 1936 called the Negro Motorist Green Book. The Green Book, as it has commonly been called, helped black motorists find safe accommodations, gas stations, restaurants, and communities that would welcome them and their business. The Green Book was published annually from 1936 to 1966, and it was an essential tool for black motorists during the time of segregation. I'm sad that such a book ever need exist, but I'm glad for the protection and the opportunity that it provided black travelers, and also for the witness and the mirror that it provides for us today. I didn't even know that such a thing as the Green Book existed until the release of the 2018 film called The Green Book. This movie is set in 1962, and it's based on the experience of an African-American jazz musician named Don Shirley, who toured the U.S. by car and introduced his white driver to the Green Book. As a white American, I didn't need to know about the existence of this little book. And that's a great example of white privilege. A lot of people, especially those who are new to the conversation about race, push back against the idea of white privilege, thinking that the term means that every white person's life is easy or privileged in some way. But that's not exactly what it means. White privilege means that one's whiteness protects them from certain negative experiences and types of discrimination. A white family in America setting off on a road trip in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s never had to consider if they would be allowed to use a bathroom, get gas in their car, or stay in a town overnight. They never needed a Green Book. It doesn't mean that their life circumstances or even their road trips were easy. It just means that race wasn't the thing that made it hard. I'm thinking about the existence of the Green Book today because its message to black travelers was, "You will be welcome in the establishments listed on these pages. You will be safe." That had to be a great relief to travelers, like a glass of cold water, so to speak. In our gospel text this morning, we are in the third week of the same story. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, Jesus looked over crowds of harassed and helpless people, and he had compassion for them. He decided to send out his own disciples to help heal the sick and cleanse the lepers and cast out demons and even raise the dead. And he gave his disciples authority to do all these things, but warned them that it wasn't going to be easy work. That was 2 weeks ago. And then last week in our text, he told them that they would encounter opposition and that their healing work might even create conflict. But then in the next breath, in our text for this morning, Jesus says to the disciples, "But you will also be welcomed." And with this message, he encourages them to step out in faith and not be afraid to take the good news of God's love and grace on the road. Yes, he acknowledges not everyone will receive you or like you or be changed by your message, but some people will. And he says, those that welcome you welcome me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Our gospel reading today is just 3 short verses, but the lessons in those verses are rich. First, this text is both a challenge and a call to be a people and a place of welcome. As I researched the Green Book this week, I found a story on Colorado Public Radio about a new digital version of the Green Book that's being developed in our state. The 2 women working on this project hope to identify places where all marginalized people can feel welcome and safe. Beyond that, where they can feel respected and celebrated. I'll tell you, a well of hope needs to be listed in this resource, because the call to love all and serve all is central to our identity. And if you own a business, or if you have any influence over the culture of a space, then you should be in that Green Book too. We are all called to welcome the stranger, to love all and serve all. That is who we are, and that is what we do. And this text is a reminder of that simple fact. With the Green Book in hand, many Black Americans were able to travel more safely, enjoy the beauty of our country and the joy of the road. And that wasn't the only benefit. In the 1949 edition of the Green Book, there was a quote from Mark Twain that said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice." Inverting Twain's original meaning, this quote revealed the truth that as more Black Americans traveled throughout the country, hopefully more white Americans might begin to question their own prejudices and see Black people as fellow Americans and fellow human beings. Our text this morning says that those who extend welcomes to others will not lose their reward. And maybe that reward is a changed perspective, new relationships, an expanded worldview, and a surrendering of old prejudices. The second lesson in this story concerns our call to be disciples in the world. Like Jesus did for the first disciples, this text encourages us to take the show on the road. The good news of God's love and grace is too wonderful to be kept in our little churches, or our houses, or even within our own group of friends. We have to get out there into the world and share it with others. Sure, some people don't want to hear it. Some people will reject it. Some people will even be hostile towards it. But you will also be welcomed. There are people in our world who are desperate to hear about a God who loves unconditionally and who welcomes all people. About a God who transforms the world through the power of love and defeats even the power of death. That message is a cool drink of water for those who thirst. So like the disciples before us, and generations of Black travelers who dared to cross a segregated country, have courage. Go with eyes wide open, but go. Hit the road. There are people out there waiting to welcome you, and that makes all the difference. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Please join us in singing our song of the day, Here I Am, Lord.
I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry. All who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, satisfied.